It's a real honor to introduce Dorothy Lazore, who I had the opportunity of being in her class some time ago. And when Ine told me that she was coming, and should we ask her to please come and share with us some of her observations and things that have changed for her over the years, as well as some of the things that have stayed the same, I said, of course. There's been a number of people that, come, and older fluent speakers are in many communities either totally absent or very much aged, and they can't work 8 hours a day no matter how much we would like to have that availability. So we have to be glad and honored when somebody like Dorothy's around, who's worked for many, many years with other people, not just up in Mohawk country, but also throughout the United States. So this was by way of introducing her, and I'm not going to say much other than maybe to ask an occasional question, but Dorothy's very capable of saying what's on her mind, and she's also open to inquiries and things of that nature. So we'll have a chance to talk with her when we get to the network section, if you want to speak to her directly. But with that, I guess I would like to introduce Dorothy and ask her in general about her observation over the years. She's been in this for many, many years, even though she looks pretty young to me. The work must keep her young. What she's observed that's the same as it was or better than it used to be, or things that give her some concern about the work we're doing and whether it's enough, and things of that nature. So, Dorothy?
Sego. My Mohawk name is Kalihuahue. My English name is Dorothy Lazore. And I've been in education for 42 years. And when I first got into education, I simply wanted to be, I guess, a teacher like everybody else, teaching the regular English program on our own native reserves. And actually, I did that for a couple of years. But my first job when I went to teach was to teach Mohawk. I graduated from university, and one school board asked me if I would go and teach Mohawk in one community, which is Kahnawake near Montreal. So I accepted the position, and from then on, I realized what was happening to our languages. I didn't realize at first that it was dwindling that fast, but I went into the school and I taught the languages as a core subject at the high school level. A couple of years later, they asked me to teach Mohawk immersion. And my first reaction was, well, there's no books, there's no materials. But an administrator convinced me to do it, so I went into the classroom into an immersion situation at the grade 1 level. With no materials, we just had to develop everything. I worked with a team of people to write our language. We started writing our language in 1972. And we worked with linguists. We took certificate programs in linguistics, and we developed textbooks to be able to teach in that immersion program. At the time, I didn't have any. I didn't think I had training to teach immersion. I know I had training to teach. And when I was teaching a grade 5 one year, regular English program, I was standing by the window and I said, wouldn't this be nice to teach all this information in Mohawk? But never once thinking that the following year, that's what I'd be endeavoring on. I said, language arts in Mohawk. I said, math in Mohawk. I was like thinking out loud to myself. Finally, in that year, that was 1981, I started teaching a grade 1 Mohawk immersion. And the kids were just tremendous. And in the summer, I worked with a team and we developed textbooks. We developed a math book, we developed science books, social studies, and I think I had like 11 little primers. And that's all I had to work with. And then when I went to teach them, I had to look at methods. How was I going to get these little kids, 6 years old, to understand what I'm saying in Mohawk when they don't even speak Mohawk at all? They had a bit of a background because the teacher at nursery kindergarten had also taught them the basics, like their colors, their numbers, some of the cultural values that we had. So they had a bit of a background. They would understand a few words that I was able to say to them. But once I got in a classroom and realized that these kids were eager, I was able to move with that. And I was able to go in. They were so receptive. All I did was take every concept in every grade level, like say, for example, math. I took all the concepts at that level, translated it into Mohawk. Even though sometimes I didn't have the material ready, the students were able to pick up those concepts. The language arts program, I worked it with the program that was there in English and translated it into Mohawk. And what didn't translate, I didn't teach. I just left it out. But mostly everything from grade 1 to grade 4, we were able to teach in our language in that one community who had started the immersion program. And we got the program right up to a grade 6 level. And then we were lacking teachers, so we started training teachers through McGill University. Anyone who was a speaker in the community, we called them. We said, would you be interested in teaching? They'd come into the classroom as a teacher's aide at first, and then they would go on to their certificate program, and eventually they went on to a teaching degree. And that's how we got the program, the whole school, complete up until grade 6. So we had gym teachers, we had we did have subject teachers because we had to keep one of the subjects, and when they did the subject program, they did a science. So that relieved the teacher of having to do just a science program. So they did the science. Our nutritionist that was in the school, our nurse that was in the school, our guidance counselor that was in the school were all Mohawk speakers. The gym teacher. So we were able to develop that right up until grade 6. And then in grade 6, we sort of transferred them a bit to English because they went off to high school after that. We had no control of that situation there. Other schools in my own community, we do have an immersion program where it's culturally based. The teachers used our Ohontakari Hodeko, which is our opening Thanksgiving prayer, and they used that as a basis to develop their program. So they developed math around that concept, science, social studies. And once again, we had to train our teachers. Now, most of them were reluctant at first because there's no school that you can go to get immersion training. The teachers that got in there, that went into the classrooms, designed, developed their own methods of teaching the students, and also the curriculum. They developed their own curriculum to teach in that program. So that's in my own community. The other immersion was in the community near Ganawage that started. A few years after that, some of the adults in the community, in this one community, Ganawage, they wanted to speak the language as well. Now, they were teachers, they had their degrees, they were teaching in the schools, they took the year off to learn the language. I took the year off and worked with them, and they, in 1 year, these teachers were able to speak Mohawk, and they went back into the classroom to teach in the immersion program. And then we also got two of them went into curriculum rather than teaching, but the others were already trained as teachers. All we had to do was provide them with the Mohawk language. In my own community right now, we have teachers going around the band office teaching our own people the language as adults. We also have an adult immersion program that just went through, the funding just went through last week. They're going to be teaching adults in the community. My friend and cousin, I should say, we're working together and we're doing an agricultural restoration program. And as Paul mentioned on the screen, that they're trying to include like knitting and sewing and weaving. We're doing the same thing with our adults. They're going back into basket making, fishing, hunting, and we're putting in the language in all those areas. We have about 29 people that we're working with presently. We also developed an immersion certificate program through McGill University back in 2002. 26 people took the year off, and they were sponsored by 3 organizations within our community, and in that community, I should say. And we developed a certificate program through McGill where we trained our people to speak the language and also to get a certificate to teach in whichever program was available, whether it was immersion or core. And the following year, every one of those students got a job in the community teaching language. And they're still at it. They're still doing it. They continued the immersion program, but not as a certificate. They just continued it as a language learning program. They wanted to speak the language. That was their main goal. But it would be interesting if they attached a certificate program so that they could go on and get their bachelor's degree in order to teach in the immersion. Because we are lacking teachers. We're in all our communities, we're struggling to get teachers to come in and teach in the immersion program. In the Brantford area, the same thing. They have, their immersion program is Cayuga and Mohawk, and they got it going right up to grade 12. But once again, they're looking to train their teachers. So they almost have to do everything, like involve somebody, engage somebody to teach the language, to be interested in teaching it, and to be interested in getting their degree. Because a lot of our people did not go into education. I don't know in your areas, but I know in ours, very few people went into education. And in the adult immersion programs, I really believe that all our people can relearn our languages. At first I thought it was just little kids, and now I know it's adults because I have experience with adults who were non-speakers, and today they're speakers, and simply because they were highly motivated to do it. Now, from my own community, I went out to, I got an invitation to go to Hawaii. I always wanted to go to Hawaii. That was one of my big dreams. Hawaii and BC. And both those 2 areas, I was able to work with the communities in developing their languages, and that was a great honor. I went out to Hawaii and I showed them just the basics of how we established our curriculum, and we presented it to their Board of Education, and they liked the idea, and they ran with it. All the islands, the teachers and the people who were working in curriculum. I know some of them didn't have training in curriculum, but they were readers and writers of the Hawaiian language. I remember we started with 1 teacher, 15 little kids, and 1 little classroom, maybe the size of this. And now you should see their program. They have over, maybe even 500 students, and they have a whole building of their own. And this team stayed together to develop that curriculum, and they continued it right from nursery. I think even 6 weeks old they take students, and it's continued right up to a PhD degree, which they completed a couple of years ago. So their school is like in full swing right up to a PhD degree. The other group that I worked with were the Shuswaps from BC, and once again we developed in their languages. We developed the curriculum and the programs in their languages. And on the Blackfoot, they went up to, I think now they're up to grade 6 in developing that. What I did was just laid out the structures that they needed to work on. And then I worked also with the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseets up in Canada, and they're doing the same thing, working in immersion, trying to get the language back. And I think immersion is the way to go for us, for all our people. It really should be our own education, but the situation, the way it is, it's mostly English programs in our schools, and there's core language programs, it's not enough. I don't feel it's enough. It has to go immersion and eventually to our own education system. The English language is very strong. I know we need it in some situations, but we also need our own languages. And a lot of our people, the ones that are still speakers, are really, really trying hard to get our people to be fluent speakers of the language, fluent readers, and fluent writers. So eventually we would be able to have our own textbooks and materials that our own people understand. And in listening, I know we develop curriculum for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but I also think we need to develop curriculum in those areas where our people can understand. So if you're listening to somebody speaking a language, or our own language, we should be able to listen and know the meaning. Speak and know the meaning, know what you're saying. Read and know what you're reading about, and writing and know what you're writing about. And I think that has to be one of our main goals in teaching our language. Any other questions? I hope I covered a few things.
I was just wondering for the group how you see this. You mentioned the part of how it was when you started and the results you see over the years, how it's grown. And you mentioned that some of your students have become teachers. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that in other communities as well? Mm-hmm.
I've seen it almost in every community, especially the Hawaiian speakers, the Hawaiian program, because they went full swing. They went full swing all the way. I know my own Mohawk community, it's a bit slower, but it's happening. We're like trying to get more people involved. I think I read an article about the Hawaiians, and they produce like almost 1,000 speakers a year. I read that somewhere. And when I spoke to them about it, they said no. I think they were just being too nice or some. But there are more speakers coming up. In my own community, I would say, especially among the young ones. The adult ones, it's not so strong, but the young ones, I would say maybe 300, something like that. In the community, we started the immersion program in Kahnawake. I would say maybe they get like 50 speakers a year. It's slower. So that's about the biggest change that's happened.
One of the new things that's happening, or relatively new, I would say, is what we're talking about is nation reunification, where some of our communities have been separated. I know there's a number of Mohawk communities, and there's 3 Oneida communities, and we're located very far apart, as well as others in the same situation. And I think that circumstance may also occur in other places in Indian country. Do you see that as an outgrowth of some of the work in language? Some of the things that Sylvia said earlier this morning kind of related to that language is the basis of, she didn't say it, but it is the basis of sovereignty, because it's the strongest indicator of identity. I wonder if you could address that a little bit.
From what I've seen over the years, I would say language is all we have left as Native people. For me, anyway. I mean, we dress the same as everybody else. Our cars are all the same. But I think our strongest thing, I think, is our language. If we have our language, you can go anywhere. I think you can, and the fact that maybe we are apart, like as Gerald said, we have Oneidas over there, but we have cars, we can go visit. You know, a long time ago they didn't have cars, but they visited more often, so maybe we can bring that back. But I think our languages, as they said, is our identity. It's who we are. Maybe it's only what we have left, only who we are. It's our strongest. I think if we're going to survive, we need to focus more on developing more language and bringing the language back into the hearts of our people. And I really think it's possible. We can do it.
You've done that work in Hawaii, and I presume you've also done it in New Zealand.
A little bit.
Yeah, with the Maoris. And we were able to go over there a few years ago and study their immersion systems, and they do have full immersion schools. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also some differences in their circumstance, in as much as Maori has one language. There's 400,000 of them, so there's a lot more percentage of the population is Maori, but they have also the same social problems that happen to people that don't have the same economic base. And so the prisons have more Maori people in prison. And I think in Canada, there's more Native people in the prisons there, as in the United States, there's more black people. Not because of any inferiority, but because of economic circumstances doesn't allow them to fully participate. From the work that you've seen and what's gone on, do you see this as also having an impact on the economies and the self-sufficiencies of the Native communities?
I think, again, I would say our language is what makes us aim towards sovereignty. And we would also be able to create more jobs through, like people learning the language. I think we just need to focus on the money that comes into our communities could be just aimed at developing whatever needs to be developed in the language. Right there, there's a position. Because I know some of the government laws that's in our community, they always ask for a translator. Well, when they have a job going, they say Mohawk is an asset. It should be a must, not an asset. And I think that's the area we need to change around so that we can develop more work opportunities. And there's a lot of work out there. I know in our community there's a lot of work for language teachers, language translators, language I don't know which area you can put them in, but in law, I know in law they have some people who get in trouble with the law, they want it translated, they want it done in Mohawk. So that type of translating, that type of work could be developed. It's just that I would say since about 1972, our communities, at least our community, almost did everything in English, when originally it was all done in Mohawk. So I think that we're slowly getting back to it. We're slowly changing it. But we need to change that. Mohawk as an asset, to Mohawk as a must. It must be done in Mohawk. You know. And there would be a lot of opportunities there, like our banks. We have banks. I know the bank right now is asking us for translations in Mohawk, and they want their staff to speak in the language, and they want to put signs up in Mohawk. And the manager of that bank is not Mohawk, and she's not Mohawk speaking, but she's pushing for it. So our own people need to do this. We need to get back to being really convinced and being proud of our ways, like our language, our spirituality, our values, and stand up to it. We need to invest in it. I think it's the thing. The thing that I admire most about the French community is that they invest in their language, they invest in their people, they invest in their governments, they invest in everything. I think they're probably a good example of being economically developed within their own languages.
I would like to shift to something a little bit more I don't want to say exciting, but interesting. Recently, we've seen in the Navajo election that there's been an issue about leaders being able to speak their own language. And it's gone into their court system, who's made decisions, and other institutions have made opposite decisions. It seems to me that the only people who would know who was fluent enough to be able to lead or be the representative of the people would be the Navajos. Still, if we looked and applied that same requirement to other nations, it seems like we would have whole councils in which nobody can speak the language. And so, you know, their relation to that means that even if you would want to have an argument in the language or discussion, it would have to be done in English, where, as you said before, the entire debate would be in the language.
Within our own confederacy, we have 6 languages, and I think most of us, maybe some of us, can only understand maybe 3 of the 6, whereas originally all our people used to understand all of the 6. I know there was more, but the other languages have died off. We have Oneida, Cayuga, Tuscarora. Tuscaroras came back in 1722. Mohawks and Senecas. Now, if we were to hold a council meeting, which they do hold some of them in the traditional Native people of our community, they still have meetings in Onondaga, but again, it's all done in English. Traditionally, maybe early 1950s, it was all done in those 6 languages. So that's a major change. They're trying to get back to it, but it's going to be quite a challenge to do it.
A few years ago, I was talking to Tom Porter, and he mentioned a concern that when looking to the future for succession of leadership and spokesmanship and those kinds of things, that the qualities in the pool of people that were available were diminishing. In other words, they don't have as many people to select from. But I was wondering, from your point of view, as to these young people coming up, they're increasing that pool of available people that have the knowledge to step into those traditional leadership roles. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Our immersion school on the American side of our reserve are actually training the young people to be able to take over some of the meetings in our traditional longhouse, to do the speeches, the introductions. Right now, it's like content-based, but the students are catching on. And some of the younger people, young adults, let's say from about 18, 19, 20, are relearning it in some communities so that they're able to take it over. Because even in our own, on the Bear side of our traditional longhouse, there's only one speaker left. And he's getting exhausted because he has to go to all the ceremonies. You know, whereas before you had a pool. You know, some people can go, and then it doesn't matter if, say I didn't go, we know there's somebody there, or somebody else couldn't make it. There was a pool of people that went, but now there's only one. There was a traditional marriage that was put up about 2 weeks ago. There was only 3 people left to do the ceremony. And if there's another ceremony, somebody else wants a traditional wedding, there's only those 3 left. Especially if they want it in the language. And most of the time they do. So we have to retrain our people and bring that information into the schools. This one school is doing it. It doesn't get into all the schools because the other schools are board schools, which is run by our own Native people, but the education is done in English. So, but this one school, we do have it. Now, some of the longhouses on our reserves, they have young people who got together on their own to learn these speeches and to learn the ceremonies, and they're teaching it to others. So that's one way of trying to bring it back, or revitalize it, and make it more alive. They're trying to make it more a living thing, not just something that I'm going to learn for 1 hour, but they're trying to bring it back into their lives as something that they're living, a living spirit.
How do you feel about the advent and use of modern media as tools in language work?
Yeah, we've done that too. We've taken, I don't know if anybody has heard of the Rosetta Stone. The one community took that Rosetta Stone. It cost quite a bit of money, over millions. But they translated, they did 160 lessons on teaching the language. So we did that. And then we also have another program right now. It's called Can 8. It's out of Toronto. And you can put any type of lesson you want on that. The students can go back and listen to it. They can record their own voice. They can go over all the lessons. And you can input the lessons that you want on the Can 8 program. You can change it. You can even give little tests on it and correct the students. And you can dialogue with them on this. Has anybody heard of the Can 8 program? No? I know they do it. The French programs use it. We've developed it in Akwesasne, the Can 8, and it's out of Toronto. And we also do a lot of CDs. We make a lot of little booklets for the little kids, and we also make little bigger books for the adults, beginning books, everyday conversation books with a CD to go with it. So we've used a lot of the technology. The one thing I haven't used yet is the telephone. Apparently you could teach a lesson and put all the lessons on a telephone, text it in. I haven't done that yet, but it might be coming.
I'm running out of questions. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask Dorothy, or comments they'd like to make? Yes?
Oh, yeah, CAN 8. Can, C-A-N, and then there's not a space, but, I mean, not an apostrophe, but just a space and 8, the number 8. Can 8 program, and it's out of Toronto. You can Google that, too. It's out of Toronto.
Chris?
Okay. Hello? Good afternoon. My name is Juan Ray Beta. I'm from Isleta Pueblo. My question is dealing with, I guess, vocabulary, just because there's been a lot of the language that has been lost, and probably a lot of terms that have been lost. And then, with you working with a lot of tribes, I'm wondering if a lot of those tribes are creating new language or creating new terms, new vocabulary to microphone or car or telephone. Are there any creation going on with creating words in your own indigenous language for those? Or you just kind of picking up that and mixing it in?
We developed, some of the words we had, and some of the words we had to create. We did have a word for computer. We did have a word for microphone, telegraph. That dates back to the, I think even 1949, when telegraph came in. We already had a word, so probably some of the, we had a lot of speakers. Up until 1952, we didn't have one English speaker in our community. Everybody spoke just Mohawk. But up to even 1960, so that language still was there. And then about 1970, it dwindled. But we do have still a lot of the speakers who can give us that information, like the old words, and that's what we're recording is the old words. But if we have to make up a new one, like right now we're translating a grade 9 science book for the grade 9 students who are in immersion. So we have words like neuron. We didn't know what to say. So what we're going to do is we're going to look it up in the dictionary. Our language is very descriptive, so we can create a word on describing what that does. What other words did we have in that grade 9? Quite a few. We have the body parts, so all those we got. The in and out we got words for. What other words could I say?
I got a question.
Yes.
You were talking about Rosetta Stone. When they were done, you guys have the copyrights, right? From your language as far as the Rosetta Stone?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because one time we tried to do that, but then we found out that they told us it cost quite a bit. And the other thing was that being that we're such a small tribe that they didn't want to, come out to our reservation and do it. So we had to do our own writing. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, Do you have your language on the songs for the national anthem in your language?
We did translate one, but some of the elders didn't really want to go along with it, so we had to shelve it for a little while. But coming back to Rosetta Stone, it is quite expensive. It's almost like $1 million and over, but that one community that developed the Rosetta Stone, they partnered with about 3 or 4 community organizations, and that's how they were able to get it.
Dorothy, could I say a little bit about that?
Sure.
One of the, what his question raises is a question of intellectual property rights. And I think that kind of comes up in the discussion as Rosetta Stone is a business. And Rosetta Stone will claim ownership to its own processes and language teaching. The matter may come up again in other contexts, but I think that it's something that tribes need to be aware of and even consider addressing their own ideas of intellectual ownership of tribal knowledge. You know, in other words, who owns the language? Well, the community owns the language, but nobody personally owns the language, and neither does a corporation. But still, you may find yourself fighting about it. My question to Dorothy would be, even though Rosetta Stone has done all this, do you find that method or Berlitz or any other method particularly more effective than the other, or is it just plain hard work on anybody that wants to get their language back?
Yes, I think it's hard work for everybody. The 2 people that they hired to do the Rosetta Stone in that one community, they were really, really fluent speakers. So they really got all the information that they needed to put on that Rosetta Stone. And they didn't really follow the Rosetta Stone. They used it as a guide, but they followed what they knew about the language, and that's what they put on that program. The first section, there's 88 lessons, and the second section, part 2, there's 88 lessons. There's something else I was going to mention.
Did you find either one of them particularly effective in terms of producing speakers?
Yes, especially in the Ganhawaga area. They have an adult immersion program that's going on every year. They get 15 students every year, and they use that program as a backup, not as the main. The teacher is the key. For me, the teacher is the key, and they have 2 good teachers in that area. They were students in the immersion program that a friend of mine and I had done back in 2003. The student came through there, and he continued in the language, and he's teaching it now, and he's very, very good because he's so committed and he's so motivated. The Rosetta Stone is like a backup tool that the students can go and practice the language. Now, the same thing with the Can 8 program. Can 8, like the number 8. It's a good teaching tool. It's good for the students to go and practice the language or practice what you've taught, but the key is the teachers. For me, anyway, I find.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, I would like to thank Dorothy for squeezing us in her schedule and making this presentation, and I would like to make her a gift from ILI of necklace.
Oh, see.
Ine told me the name of the artist that I've already forgotten, but
Thank you.
he or she was a brilliant person,
Oh, wow.
and it just fits your outfit.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Now.
No.